So I want to know what are the questions you have, because obviously people are loving your questions and loving your questions, because you're like a jury, you're like a person, jury person.
I'm the fresh face. I only came in like in the last few weeks.
And yeah. What did you think of the closings? What did you think of the closings? Tell me what you thought of each of the closings.
I thought the defense was and I heard you speak about it after, and I agree 100% with everything you said. I thought that he was phenomenal. I think you said, Linda, he was the best you've ever heard.
I bet best closing I've ever heard given, and I've heard a lot of closings. Best one I've ever heard given. Yeah.
You have a great show. So, and by the way, I want to tell you something else that's great. While I'm watching, I'm speaking to you. I've got my TV on, and while you tuned into the court where you heard Judge Bev give that instruction, which I think is important for people to know when they're coming back. Court TV, they didn't have it. They had some guy talking. They should have interrupted and shut him up and put him back in the courtroom. They don't have a good producer.
So, there's this whole movement now to have this delay and to talk. I think people want to hear it as it's going on.
I need to know when it's happening.
Yeah, that's why you're watching. That's why I think YouTube is the streaming is where it's going to go. We tried to get a
first time. Listen to you.
No, we have press credentials. We have press credentials for Center Street, for Atlanta, and we're small. We just started like 6-8 months ago, and Massachusetts doesn't recognize any YouTube streamers if that's all they have as media. What are we talking about?
They will. They
have to. So what was the high point of Alan Jackson's closing to you? Because I'm going to ask you the same thing about Brennan.
I agree with everything. Like I said, where he opened up with 3 words: not guilty, not guilty. No. He said
collision.
Because he was explaining to the jury that this case is all about her hitting him or not hitting him. So if you believe she didn't touch him, if the car didn't touch him, then there's nothing, we're not talking about anything else. That's all we're talking about. Did she hit him or did she not hit him? So if you don't think she hit him because there's not enough physical evidence to prove it, which there isn't.
There isn't. There's not enough. Whether you think she did it or not. He barred, it's interesting, Alan barred from really the California charges, which Johnny Cochran, if you go back and look at his closing in the O.J. Simpson case, talked about it. You may think they did it. It may be possible they did it. It could be probable they did it. Most likely they did it. But it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. He borrowed from that California charge, which he's used to because that's where he practices, in California.
And I thought he's doing this pro bono the second time. Is that true?
That's what he says. And very well could be. I mean, he's certainly gotten a lot of publicity.
A lot about how he feels about his client, because I don't know too many lawyers who go pro bono, even if they did lose the first trial.
So the high point you think was the collision, not guilty.
I thought that he was able to take you through the story and give you a lot of common sense, because throughout the trial, there were moments, like I said, that I just wanted to fall asleep. And I got very angry at the prosecutor mostly. Sometimes he would be, what's his name, Alan? Sometimes he would be a little aggressive. But Hank has like no personality. So when he's aggressive, he's just mean.
You have a problem with your memory? Like women you have a problem with your memory? I was like really pissed.
Linda, you have no idea. I would be so fucking, and the judge would be yelling at me because I would be like, don't talk to me like that.
But how about the ham sandwich, okay? What I wanted to say when he asked Dr. Welcher, he said, well, did you go have a ham sandwich with the defense team? He said, yes, I'm waiting for the car.
But I would have said, I'm kosher. I don't appreciate it.
That's great. I think that's great. I would have followed up if I were the defense. Here would be my mouth. Excuse me, doctor, was it with mayonnaise? What kind of mayonnaise? Was it Hellman's? Was it Duke's? Was it Kewpie? Or did it have mustard? Did it have raw? I mean, it was so ridiculous.
So let's talk about this as a legal, as an attorney, right? You're a defense attorney now, but you were a prosecutor. So
yeah. And somebody asked, what's the fastest I've ever had a jury come in? I had a jury come in for a murder verdict, finding somebody guilty of murder in 45 minutes. That's my fastest jury ever.
And it took 45 minutes. In other words, it's not, you still have to fill out the paperwork, people.
Right.
First of all, you're all going to sit down, and sometimes, I think you talked about this, most of the time, and I've been a juror, by the way.
You have been? Oh, because we have I think our jury consultant is going to come to join you at 5 p.m. Yes, Richard Gabriel, who is like my jury consultant inspector and was a jury consultant at ASAP Rapi with Michelle. He's joining us because I said you're going to be on, so he's going to join us. You're going to be able to ask him questions.
I have questions for him. So I was on, and I'll talk about it when he's on, but I was a juror on a rape carjacking.
A rape carjack. Oh my God. Oh my. Why don't you need PTSD from that? That is.
It was, and you know what? It was in Fort Tyrone Park. For anybody who doesn't know, that's north of Harlem and north of Washington Heights. It's like past the GW Bridge north. Right. That's Fort Tyrone Park is. And it's like Central Park for where they live. It's a beautiful park, I've heard, and has views of the Hudson. And if you know, and it was a lover's lane, and there was a couple making out, and these 4 African-American men got up on the car and carjacked the car, and she was raped.
Oh my God. Oh, the poor woman.
All you know as a juror, right, is you have one of the boys on trial, and because they don't tell you everything until after, which they don't always do. First of all, I had a great judge, which makes such a difference, because as a juror, if you have a great judge, you want to please him. Like, you want to do the right thing by him, because you want him
or her. And that's the part I told everybody here, that the jurors get attached to their judges. You got to be careful.
Very much attached to him. And he was like the god, you know, for the 2 or 3 days that we were deliberating. But I will tell you what I loved about my judge. When we were over and we gave our verdict, which I'll tell you, and I'll tell you how we found how we found the answer. He came in afterwards and he says, I just want to tell you that you guys were right on the law. You did the right thing. So what happened was, he was charged with the carjacking and the rape. And at the end of it, we didn't believe he did the rape. We didn't believe he could prove that he did the rape. She was raped for sure, but we just weren't sure it was him or one of the others. And we didn't know what happened to the others. We found out afterwards that they all pled. And the reason why this boy didn't plea is because he wrote a confession, and he wanted it thrown out because he said it was a forced confession. So that's why he was on trial. Otherwise, he would have pled out. But we didn't know about the plea. We didn't know where the 3 boys were. So when we were in the jury room and we're trying to decide, is this boy guilty or not guilty, we're all reading this confession. And one of the jurors, and I would like to take credit, it wasn't me, there was a correction on it. Like, let's say he crossed it out and it said black, and he crossed it out and he wrote blue, okay? So I'm just using that as what he did. I don't remember what the words were, but he had some corrections, and then he signed his name, okay? So this is what someone said, if you were forced into a confession, would you correct it? That was it.
So that you convicted him.
He knew that if he corrected the confession, then it was a confession. If it was a coerced confession, you would sign it.
Just sign it no matter what, because you think the cops are right. Yeah.
Also, what he corrected was irrelevant. Like, we didn't correct where he admitted or didn't admit. It was something innocuous, like black or blue.
Yeah.
It was something technical or whatever. And that's why we found him guilty. So when the judge came back and he says, you know, you guys were right, he absolutely did it.
Oh, that's interesting.
But now I can tell you he did it. I know he did it, and you got it right. And yes, you shouldn't have found him guilty on the rape because you couldn't prove that.
But that's afterwards. So when you were in the trial, did the judge give you any hint?
I want to ask you, Linda, do judges do that? He said no. He said he says most of the time you won't hear this from a judge. Is that true? Does the judge
most of the time the judge will bring you in when there's a conviction. They'll tell the jury, you know, you got the right job. Most of the time they'll talk to the jury afterwards. Okay.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, they generally do in a serious case like that, because they want the jurors to understand. They want them to go home and be able to sleep at night when you have that kind of serious crime. On the run-of-the-mill thing, a burglary, and I say that I don't say that lightly, but you know, I'm not talking about where somebody's going to go to jail from 25 to life. They don't do it because they don't care. But on that, where they know that the jurors are very, very concerned about whether they got it right, because I'm sure you were, right? You did your work, which is why I feel like, validation.
Well, that's why I feel like I'm in the jury of caring. Like, I understand the gravity, and that's why I said you're not going to get a quick verdict, because every single person there, if they're going to convict, they've got to make sure they convict rightfully in their mind and they can sleep at night. And also, if you're going to say not guilty, you want to make sure you're not making a mistake and letting someone guilty go.
Right. It's important to you. What if you don't want to be responsible? I can't imagine being responsible for a wrongful conviction. I don't know how.
Some people have to come to terms with themselves. And like, I have a very quick brain. You have a quick brain. That's why you do what you do. I do it. Some people are slower. It takes them a minute. They have to digest it. So I think, and so this is what I was going to say, and I think you had said this for those who are listening. So one of two things will happen, and because I was in a jury room, you'll take a straw vote right away. Because sometimes it's obvious in a case someone's guilty or not. And it doesn't have to be a murder. I'm just saying sometimes it's obvious. Like, we know the guy did it. And then everyone's like, he did it, and we're done. sometimes it's if it's no, I still think you have to go through it to make sure you're not letting a guilty guy go. So no matter what, I think that they're going to do a straw. If they do a straw, not everyone's going to say they want to give an answer yet. I don't think everyone's going to give an answer. And I think they're going to have to go through some of it, maybe not all of it. And I don't think you'll have a verdict for like at least a day. So today, I think Monday, maybe Tuesday.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because most of the people, I think most of the people in our poll vote today, I said Monday. I said late Monday because I think they're going to think about it over the weekend. And that jury sheet is so hard. Last time they were 4 days. Last time they went out on Tuesday, and after they had the 2 hung, remember they came back and they said, well, you brewer and follow. They came back on like 2 days later and said they were hung, and she gave them what's called this dynamite Allen charge, which says, well, go back in there and try again. And then they came back and said they were hung, and that took 4 days. That was 4 days.
Well, let me ask you a question. With the hung, was it the same number both times?
We don't know. We don't know because the judge didn't inquire. That was a problem.
What do you mean?
We didn't inquire. The judge didn't inquire whether or not the judge didn't inquire whether they were hung on one charge or all. And it turns out
were they hung on one juror or 5 jurors?
We don't know. They didn't ask. The judge didn't ask the question. They never asked the question.
Afterwards, didn't the jurors come out and say, "Listen, this asshole"?
There's been 2 stories. Some of the jurors said we all acquitted on 1 and 3. That was an agreement. And then other jurors said it was 6-5. Someone said it was there was 6-5, and one undecided. One said it was 10-3 or 10-2. One said it was 9-3. So who the heck knows?
You're telling me that 12 people couldn't come out with the same answer of how they?
Yeah, no, apparently not.
I mean, that's a problem.
And the problem maybe is because you had all these. You have these sub things here. It's not just count 2. It's these sub charges. It's the lesser included. So maybe they were screwed up on who was for one lesser included or who was against all the lesser included.